Are you going through a spiritual awakening? Are you going through a crisis in your life? Or are you experiencing what's called a dark night? You don't even really know what a dark night is, but you know your life's in darkness. Well, this podcast is here to support you about what is a spiritual awakening, what is a dark night, and how do you get through your crisis?
Hello and welcome to Brave Conversations. I'm your host, Sheila V. This podcast is all about helping you get brave, courageous, and confident to make real and lasting changes in your life so that, yes, you are living your truth. I'm here to help you navigate your spiritual awakening, to guide you how to heal from trauma in your past, and to manifest the life that you know you deserve. You are powerful, you are divine, and I'm here to remind you that you can achieve anything that you want in your life. I am a transformation coach, a spiritual teacher, a business mentor, a speaker, an author, and a badass brave woman. And I am obsessed with women bravely and courageously showing up to live their life with no apologies. And I cannot wait to get into today's episode with you.
I've been a mentor and a coach for 10 years now. I've been a spiritual medium for that length of time. I've done thousands and thousands of readings for clients as a spiritual medium, psychic medium. I've mentored hundreds and hundreds of men and women. And the most common factor that I find with all of them is they come to me in the middle of their spiritual awakening, their dark night, their crisis, or they come to me when they're about to go into it because they're looking for support. So I want to help you understand if you're going through maybe your first crisis or your first dark night, or you're having a spiritual awakening. And I want to help you to understand why you are going through this thing that feels so difficult. Now, the first point I want to land is that a dark night is a course correction. So let's define and describe a dark night. A dark night is not a depression. It's more than that. It's a transformational experience that will require you to transform your mindset, your emotional mastery, your physical well-being, and access deeper levels of spirituality within yourself. When you're going through a spiritual awakening or a dark night, it's meant to transform you entirely. It's meant to transform your identity in the world, potentially how you show up in the world, the relationships you're in, your purpose, and what you're doing. So the dark night is a course correction. And when we're in the dark night, we are meant to allow the transformation to occur. The problem is many of us, me included, have resisted the dark night. Now, why do we resist our dark nights? We resist our dark nights because we like safety and security. We like leading a predictable life. So we prefer to be in something safe and familiar, even though it's difficult, it's toxic, it's not healthy. We have a perception of familiarity, a perception of safety, even if none exists. So what are some examples and very common examples of dark nights, spiritual awakenings that I've had many of my clients go through and I've been through myself? So examples include job redundancies, where we might have stayed in a job for way too long. We've outgrown it. It's time to move on, but we don't even know how to start looking. We don't kind of want to because it's safe and secure. Okay. So job redundancies, being fired by job in a job is another kind of in that cluster. Relationships suddenly ending, or having a partner cheat on you, or coming home and a partner's just like wants out. And it might be a relationship that you knew wasn't right, or a relationship that was toxic in many ways, or a relationship where you were feeling that you were self-abandoning consistently. Okay. Another way is a dark night comes about is it's time for us to start doing our purpose work. It's time to start honoring our spiritual gifts and making the pivot and transition into using those gifts for humanity, for our work, for our purpose. Now, we might resist that because we might have the limiting belief, I can't make money if I do this. I won't be respected if I do this kind of spiritual work, or I start my side hustle, right? So because we've been resisting the changes and transformation in our life, the universe has no choice but to give us what I call dark night of the soul. And in my book, Brave, I call it the dark night of courage, because it requires courage to go into the dark night, to stay in the dark and allow the true transformation to happen. Dark nights are not convenient. Dark nights don't appear on social media. They're not goal oriented. They're not convenient for people around us. People sometimes struggle when we're in a deep transformative space, because you might have friends or family around you that will like just get your life together, just pull it together. You might need to spend 6 months out of work. You might need to spend 6 months in therapy, really understanding why you stayed in a toxic relationship. So dark nights are actually probably one of the most useful things you'll go through in your life, and it will be one of the hardest. So let me share with you my dark night. I was not allowing any transformation or change to happen in my life. I knew I had spiritual gifts. I knew I was a medium. I was scared that people would judge me if I came out of the psychic spiritual closet and talked about these gifts and abilities. I was scared my parents and family would be angry or disappointed in me if I left my career. I just finished an MBA. So I was on my way to becoming a CEO, a CFO, an executive. It didn't make sense, the changes I was going through, or to even honor myself. So a small cluster of events happened in my life to create probably the biggest course corrections in my life. And I'm here doing this podcast now. I've written a book. I run multiple programs about women's empowerment, spiritual awakening, how to get your spiritual business up and running. I'm doing all of that now because of my dark night 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I was walking down the street in the city of Sydney. It was a summer's day and I broke my toe walking. So the first thing that happened to me was a physical injury, and it can be a physical manifestation of illness or an injury. It's the first sign of a dark night. So I broke my toe and the universe was sending me the sign, you're not willing to take a step forward in your life. So I ended up having a boot. My whole leg was in a boot, and I was in a lot of pain. And I was being shown daily, you're not taking a step forward in your life, because I did not want to quit my job. I didn't want to lose my sparkly job title and my income. I wanted the safety and security of a corporate job. The next thing that happened, I had all these leaky emotions. I was sort of suppressing depression and anxiety because I knew I wanted to use my spiritual gifts. And so my apartment flooded. The bathroom next to my apartment flooded into my apartment. No other apartment was affected, and my whole apartment, the carpet was ruined, and I needed to move out of my apartment. Leaky emotions, leaky taps. Water is a sign of emotions not regulated. And the universe was showing me in my physical environment, you are not having any emotional mastery. You're suffering from depression and anxiety, and you're pretending you don't. So I had to move out of my apartment into an Airbnb. I'm sitting in my Airbnb with a broken foot, and this guy I was dating at the time calls me and he breaks up with me. And this was a relationship that wasn't loving or gentle or supportive. It was a relationship that was toxic and unhealthy. See, and I wasn't willing to leave it. So he had to break up with me. He had to find the courage to leave me. I wasn't willing to leave him. I was just happy to be dating somebody. Okay. That was how low my self-worth was back then. So here I am, broken foot in Airbnb, single now. Well, a week later, I go to work, and I just come back from studying at the Arthur Findlay College in England, mediumship. I came back from this college and I realized I am a medium. I can channel dead people. I am very psychic. I have these pronounced spiritual gifts that I need to start using. But I did not want to know about it. And I would log on at my computer every morning and I would say to myself, I hate this job. I wish I didn't have it. I hate this job. I wish I didn't have it. And what I didn't realize was that I was manifesting a job loss. Well, one morning I walked into work, I was marched into the HR's office and I was fired. And do you know something? In that moment, I knew that I was being saved from my small life and I did not know how to do it by myself. And I needed the universe to give me a course correction. I left the HR's office. I walked back to my desk. I picked up all my crystals, put them in my handbag, and I walked out the door. And it was the beginning of me starting my spiritual business. The next day, I asked a friend to start a website, business cards. I mean, this was a long time ago, 10 years ago. Business cards were still a thing back then. But it was the beginning of me honoring and owning my spiritual gifts. Okay. It was one of the hardest times. Dark nights tend to be a cluster of events together. to create the course correction. So you might have physical illness, you might have a job loss, you might have a relationship breakdown, financial worries all together. The universe is actually trying to dismantle our egos, our attachment to things, so that we can reconstruct a new identity. And like I said, I look back at that time now as one of the most important times in my life, because it was the time where I started to honor my spiritual gifts. So, are you resisting a dark night, and are you resisting changes in your life? Okay. The other important point I want to make about the dark night is, so many clients come to me asking me, what's my purpose? How do I step into my purpose? And I'll promise you this, and this is my experience in my life, is that my dark nights have actually been, on the other side of the dark night is where my purpose has been discovered. The dark night is the process of transforming us from victim mentality into victory, into the victor. So on so many of the dark nights, right before I lost my job and I had the breakup and the broken foot and my apartment flooding, I was a victim. I hated my job. I complained about it every day. I wanted to do my spiritual work, but I complained that it would be too hard to do. Because of the dark night, it gave me strength and resilience to start seeing a different point of view, right? It started me on a trajectory of so much personal development work. I've done so many courses and workshops because I had to start looking and reconstructing the new identity. So another aspect of the dark night is you will need to be supported by healers, teachers, people with transformative tools to help you get through it. So what did that look like for me? And I'd love you to, be inspired by sort of my process and how I got through it. Working with an astrologist will show you and give you tools, because quite commonly in your astrology, there will be evidence that a dark night is happening. And with astrology counseling, you'll probably be able to find someone who could help you understand why you're going through the difficulties you're going through and what you haven't addressed in your life. You might have no boundaries. You might allow people to bully you. You might be remaining in toxic relationships, and the universe is saying, enough of this pattern. You've been doing it for 10 years. We want you to stop. So a very good astrologist will give you insight into your natal patterns to help you overcome them. Secondly, you might want to work with an Akashic reader. Akashic readers can help go into the records and see what patterns, what contracts, what vows have you made that it's time to break them or change them. It's time for really big pattern interrupts when you're going through your spiritual awakening, a dark night, or a crisis. So any tools that can help you, give you insights where you have blind spots, are essential now. You might want to work with an energy healer, kinesiologist, to start working with your auric field and your energy field. So when I'm doing my mentoring and coaching, I tell clients, get a spiritual board of directors around you, get a board of healers, people to support you with your transformation. It's very rare we can go through a dark night on our own. So I'm asking you the question, if you're going through a dark night, who is supporting you through your dark night? Who is giving you insights and helping you with your blind spots? If you want me to support you, please reach out. But bring multiple people in to support you. It's not just one person. It's going to be people to give you different perspectives. You might never have had therapy in your life. It might be time to work with a therapist, a counselor, psychologist, a well-being coach, whatever you feel drawn to. It's the time to do that now. The next thing is, your purpose is probably going to lie on the other side of it. So you're going to need probably a high performance coach, or a coach or a mentor. Once you move out of the healing phase of the dark night, you'll move into, and I find this consistently with clients, when we do some big healing work that might take 2 months, 3 months, I find consistently my clients want to move into high performance. And I get very excited at this time, because they're showing me they're moving out of the dense energy of the dark night, of the crisis, and they're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel, right? They're not out yet, but they have an appetite for change and a mindset for change now, where they didn't have that at the beginning of the dark night, and I didn't either. So when I lost my job, I started to feel hopeful that I could potentially honor myself. It was when you get to the other side of the dark night actually gives us a strength and a resilience we didn't have before. It gives us a level of self empowerment and power we never had access to before. That's the point of the dark night. We move from being very disempowered to being highly empowered. But we can only go through that process by starting to honor ourselves. So the dark night process, I find consistently, is a journey of self-love. So I had to stop worrying about what my family thought. And then I had to get to the point it didn't matter if they stopped accepting me. I knew that they'd always love me, but maybe they wouldn't accept me. And for a time there, they struggled. However, I had to love myself more than anyone else in the world. And that's what the dark night taught me was, what does self-love look like? What is radical self-acceptance of all parts of myself? Not just the parts that other people would validate, the parts that I felt would be judged. It was time during the dark night to start loving that part of myself. Now, this is where the deepest healing work comes from. The radical self-acceptance is what happens before we start stepping into our purpose work. And quite often the dark night will take us to the purpose. This is when we start becoming healers. I sat with so many amazing teachers. I started to learn about trauma. They impacted my life so much that I started to realize this is what I want to do with my life. And it wasn't going to happen overnight, but I knew that the dark night had done the course correction it needed to. I had another dark night. It was many years later when I had another breakdown in a relationship. And I'd been called to do the medicine of ayahuasca for many years, but no door opened. And I don't actually think I was ready to. So many years later, I had this breakdown and I ended up finding a shaman in Peru and having this ayahuasca experience, 5 ceremonies in the Amazon jungle. It was another dark night. So the other thing is dark night, you don't just have one dark night, you have multiple dark nights. But this was probably my second or third dark night now. And I was more equipped. And I knew when I was going into the Amazon jungle, I was going into a deeply transformative time and I would emerge very differently. And the dark night, it will always give us strength. I had these ceremonies in the Amazon jungle. I came out of the jungle and I ended up quitting my job 6-7 months later and writing my book called Brave, right? So it was time for me to up level again. So you might find every time you up level, every time you are called to access more and more self-worth, self-love, self-power, you might need to go through a dark night. Now, it doesn't always have to be as dark as the first one, or it might be. But the dark night does tend to accompany some level of up leveling. Now, many years later after then, I end up meeting my partner and I go on a fertility journey, right? And this fertility journey, it's taken us 2 years. It's been incredibly challenging. And we've now gone down the donor egg route where I've got a donor egg and we're looking at me falling pregnant using a donor egg. Now, that was another dark night I needed to go through to give up my dream of having a child biologically my own, going through the failure of IVF multiple times, like 7, 8 times. And the dark nights in our life don't end. They just call us to become more who we are and who we want to be. And so the dark nights take different shapes, different form. But at the end of the dark night, I've personally found I've become a stronger, more resilient version of myself. And it's always taken me to the next purpose, the next version of myself needed for my purpose. So I hope this is giving you some insights about kind of what commonly is a spiritual awakening or a crisis. I hope it's normalized it for you and you feel like there's some support there. So to get through the dark night, it's about being resourced. And after you go through several dark nights, you'll find you're resourcing yourself internally more than you've ever known before. You'll find yourself becoming the most strongest version of yourself. And you're going to look back a year, 2 years, 5 years at that younger version of yourself. And you're going to think, my God, look at how strong I've become. Look how brave I've become. look at how transformed I've become. So fundamentally, my life is so much different than what it was many years ago, but it's way more authentic. So I guess the last point I want to land is the dark night takes you to become the most authentic version of yourself. That is the point. Because for quite a long time, you might have been abandoning yourself to please people around you, to become what you thought they wanted you to become. That was my story. So my dark nights ended up taking me from the construct I thought I needed to be towards the life that I wanted to live authentically. Was that journey difficult and one of the most difficult journeys I've ever been through? Yes. Is it one of the most rewarding journeys? Yes. I hope this podcast today has helped you understand how to get through a crisis, a spiritual awakening, or a dark night of courage. Big love to you all.
Thank you so much for listening. I love you. I'm filled with gratitude for you. I honor you for choosing you, your personal growth, and your evolution. Thank you for letting me into your world. It has been a privilege. Now do me one favor, one big thing. Share this podcast with a soul sister or brother who needs to hear this. My mission on planet Earth is to help as many people as possible so we can be bold, be brave, and be courageously ourselves. I'll see you on the next episode.